Keith Krach is simply larger than life. It didn't surprise me at all that he was named the Transformational Leader of the Year. You spend 5 minutes with Keith and you just think you can do anything.
Hello, I'm Viva Bianca, and today I have the honor of speaking with entrepreneur, philanthropist, business leader, and former chairman and CEO of Ariba and DocuSign, Keith Krach. A trailblazer in transformational leadership and today's recipient of the life&news Transformational Leadership Award, Keith transformed factory automation as a pioneer in robotics, transformed engineering automation by creating a new category of mechanical design software, created B2B e-commerce industry when founding Ariba, transformed higher education when helping Purdue University reduce student debt, transformed digital transactions with DocuSign, and is currently transforming mentorship with the Virtual Mentor Network. Please welcome Keith Krach.
Viva, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you.
Well, it's an honor to be with you and in your beautiful home. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it.
Keith, I've just listed off a mouthful of transformational accomplishments, and I'm certain I'm just scratching the surface. So as someone who's arguably an authority on the subject, what does it mean to be a transformational leader?
Well, Viva, I think three things. The first is it's about change, and I believe change is the most powerful word in any language because, as you know, without change we don't develop, prosper, or grow. And it's about transformational leaders will challenge that status quo. The other thing, it's about people. At the end of the day, no matter what kind of business you're in or what kind of cause you're supporting, you're in the people business, and that's the multiplier for everything. So the ability to inspire and mobilize and unify is absolutely key. But it all starts with the noble cause, whatever that noble cause may be. And if you're successful, it's about that impact or making a difference, whether it's a big difference, a little difference, but most of all, a meaningful difference to that noble cause.
How would you describe the difference between a transformational leader and a traditional leader?
Well, if you look at the traditional leader, it would be focused on what I would call production or the bottom line, profits, quarterly earnings. Where if you look at a transformational leader, it's more focused on impact and more long-term thinking as opposed to short-term thinking, the traditional way. And I think a transformational leader, thinks in strategic terms as opposed to tactical terms. And the other thing about a classic traditional leader is they usually kind of follow the status quo. I mean, think about, let's open the policy manual and see what are the instructions there, where I think a transformational leader will challenge that status quo and will inspire and will unify people along those regards.
You've talked before about defying convention and challenging the status quo, and you've just mentioned it again, and that's a key characteristic of transformational leadership. And yet it occurs to me that many of us aren't raised to think in that way, that following convention is often encouraged. Right. So how can you explain this concept, and can you provide some examples of how it's worked for you in your career?
Yeah, I think I had great examples growing up. My mother was definitely in and out of the box thinker, and I think a big characteristic goes along with that as well is curiosity, and I think that's a key. Is you always want to learn more about people, student of human nature, how things work, and think about different ways to solve and envision problems, and. My father used to describe my mom as that your mom only has one rule: there are no rules. And then he would say, now there's three, Keith. The first one is don't hurt anybody physically. The second is, don't do anything illegal. And the third thing is, don't hurt anybody's feelings. Other than that, you can do anything you want. So I think, growing up with that model in terms of change, when you're growing up, there's a lot of self-doubt. Well, there always is some self-doubt, some insecurities. And I guess if anything I've learned, just jump in that water over your head, because you're gonna learn to swim. And that really truly is when you learn the most. And I just seem to be doing it one after another, and it's scary, but after a while it becomes addicting. I call it scary fun. And it reminds me when my two sons were young, and the oldest guy was 7 years old, and he goes, "Come on, Carter," who's 5 years old. He goes, "Let's go on the roller coaster. Let's go on the roller coaster with Dad." And the 5-year-old Carter, he's going like, I don't know. Finally convinced, we're in line. And, his brother's going, "You're going to love it. You're going to go love it." And then we're going up like that first big hill, and he clicks in. And I'm sitting next to Carter, and Steve's in the car front. And all of a sudden he looks back and he just goes, "Carter, we're going to die. We're going to die." And I'm like going, "Oh, man." And then you go down the hill and you're whipping around. He's screaming his head off. I'm thinking I'm the worst father that ever came to existence. Then it comes to a screeching halt. And I look over at Carter, and he just goes, "Dad, that was scary fun. Let's do it again." And I think that's a great metaphor for life, because after a while, it does. I mean, it becomes addicting. It's fun. You want to do it over and over again.
You've explained that empowering and mobilizing others is also a key characteristic of transformational leadership. And I also understand this is one of your greatest gifts. What's your secret? How do you inspire and mobilize other people in your life?
Well, I think it starts with that noble cause, and inspiring a shared vision, because people support what they help create. I think that is key. And I also think it is about, in addition to challenging that status quo, it is about empowering others. And it's more than just delegating authority that goes with responsibility. It's about creating a safe environment. And, in the companies I've had the good fortune of building, we always have a playbook, and that's the vision, the mission, the values, the team rules, the long-term goals, strategy, all boiled down to execution. And the team rules have always been the same. And team rule number 2 is, no idea is a bad idea. So, say anything you want. The crazier, the better. And it may be super crazy, but it might spark another idea. And then what we did is we modify it, and we put in parentheses, unless it's the CEO's. Because it's fun to mock out the CEO. Right. And actually that creates a safe environment. So I think that is, I think that's key. The other thing is encourage the heart, because people can deny your logic, but they cannot deny your enthusiasm. And then I think maybe the last one is modeling the way, because the most powerful form of leadership is leadership by example, because everybody's looking at you. So I think in terms of unifying and mobilizing, those are some of the keys. The other great thing is to have a competitor. You have the noble mission. You have you have a common enemy. And by the way, in many of the companies I built, it's paper, right? Right. So people are focused externally instead of focusing at the water cooler.
In 20 years of interviewing lots and lots of leaders, Keith just stands out. His honesty, his sincerity, his kindness. And that's him as a person. I think that's so important as a leader. But then when you talk about the business aspect, the way he thinks about things, it's incredible. And when I look at the work that he's done, having interviewed him, when I look at what he did with Ariba, when I look what he has done with DocuSign and what he has brought to it, and how he made these companies the category king, and his depth of thought and how you do that, I think, is just absolutely incredible.
I'd be interested in hearing about your pivot from General Motors to Silicon Valley, speaking about scary fun and placing yourself in a space of discomfort.
Yeah.
How was that transition for you, and how did you cope with it?
Yeah.
To reinvent yourself, so to speak.
Yeah. It was difficult. It was like I was running the 100-meter dash and got smacked in the face by a 2x4. So, I'd been at General Motors for 10 years. I left right along when I was my 30th birthday. And, back then, when you were a vice president at General Motors, you were going to stay, for a 40-year career. So people thought I was nuts, leaving and coming out to Silicon Valley. And I came out as number 2 person in a software company. And the second day on the job, the CEO said, Keith, this is what I want you saying in the board meeting. And I just thought about it and I said, I will not. That would be lying. And right then I knew I probably made the mistake of my life. And, upon reflection, there was no way I was going back to General Motors, just out of sheer pride, I think. And it was about the worst 9 months of my life because on one hand, I had never really quit anything without the mission, in essence, being done. But on the other hand, I wasn't living my values every day. And I didn't share the same set of values as that CEO. And I thought maybe I could change the culture of the company, something like that. I actually couldn't. So this was when my oldest son was being born. That particular day, and IBM was coming into the company, and they were our biggest investor. And so she gave me a call and said, Keith, you got to come in. We have the IBM folks. I go, no, I talk with the team. I'm not missing the birth of my son. And after the third time, I finally told her to do something that's anatomically impossible to do. And I said, I quit. And that was a very scary time because here I am now with 2 children, this California mortgage. I don't know hardly anybody out here. And but what that really did was that laid the foundation for, the next company, Rasner, Reba, and all that. And I learned probably one of the most valuable lessons of my life. And that is the importance of a strong set of values. And growing up in Ohio, going to school at Purdue and at General Motors, it just seemed like everybody had a strong set of values and integrity. Mm-hmm. And it was so much right in front of my face, I didn't see it, so I took it for granted. And I made sure that would never happen again. I mean, everything in life revolves around a strong set of values and integrity. If that's not at a company, you're working with, if I had to do it all over again, I would have quit right there. But I think that was a valuable lesson. So that was my transition to Silicon Valley.
So it sounds like you were up against traditional leadership. We were talking about that earlier, traditional leadership versus transformational leadership. What would be your advice to people who come up against that today? Yeah,
I think my advice would be don't make the same mistake that I made. Leave. Leave, because people can say, I don't like how you look, where you went to school, all that, but they can never take away your integrity and your values.
I think with Keith, what's really interesting and what makes him kind of takes him to the next level as a leader is that he is so invested in creating more transformational leaders and creating this, multiplier effect, so to speak, of taking all of his experience, other people's experience from different amazing leaders in his network, and using that to change the whole world through, millions and millions of other transformational leaders.
Going back to an earlier time in your life when you were a kid, who or what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, when I was really little, I would tell everybody, I can't decide whether I want to be a truck driver or the Pope. Now that was because my favorite uncle just told me to say that. And then I kind of got realistic. I want to be a professional football player. It would have been good to be Aussie rules football. But I think really it evolved to, I wanted to be like my father, because he was always just so kind and so humble, and he was super funny, and everybody just loved him. And I remember one day we were driving in the factory, and he wasn't, he wasn't a real bear huggy kind of guy. He was a German guy, and I said, Dad, just everybody loves you, Why? What's the secret to that? And he just took the car, just pulled in a Burger King parking lot, put the brake on, and he just looks at me and he goes, when you're with the Pope, you pray. When you're with a drunkard, you drink. Everything in between goes, but always be yourself and never lose your integrity. And that was really a valuable lesson. I mean, he was teaching me the importance of range and respecting different temperaments, talents, and convictions, but always stay true to yourself.
And I read that your first job very early on was a welder in your dad's machine shop. Is that right? Yeah.
Well,
what was that like?
Well, that is right. I was working in my dad's 5-person machine shop. Actually, the first job was cleaning the sinks, cleaning the toilets. Then I worked up to being a welder, and then I worked up to working on the machines. It was a great experience for so many different reasons. And I learned so many different things. I mean, the first thing that I learned was a good work ethic, and also understanding what things are like on the factory floor. And also there were plenty of opportunities actually to do little innovations, because it was all about how fast could you make all these parts. I also learned what it's like during tough times, because this machine shop, the big customers were the automotive companies, and when their business went down, ours just went absolutely flat. And I remember a year where it was just my dad and me. We were the only employees, and to watch how tough that is, but also to watch his resiliency in terms of that. And I also could see in this environment why people loved working for him, because he just had an amazing self-deprecating sense of humor. He used to mock yourself out. And he was a boxer in the Army, and he would say, Keith, you ever get in a situation where you just feel like there's no way out? And I'm going, Dad, what are you talking about? What are you talking? He goes, like you're a boxer and you're just getting pummeled in the corner of the ring. I go, yeah, I've had, you get that warm feeling inside. He goes, yeah. He goes, there's one way out. I go, what are you talking about, Dad? He goes, no, there's one that works every time. I go, what is it? He goes, mock yourself out. He goes, that gets you out every time. And he said, and he goes, and that's funny. He goes, but don't mock other people out. That's not funny. Plus you can hurt their feelings.
How do I meet your dad? He sounds amazing. I want your dad.
Oh, he's great.
And speaking of fatherhood, I'm aware that you've been a pretty inspirational father yourself, and that you and your son founded Venture Academy. And I understand this was during a pretty transformational year that you took with your son.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about the adventures you went on and Venture Academy itself?
Yeah. So, this was kind of, I came up with this idea right after running hard for 7 years at Ariba. And I call Steve, my son, the Hail Mary catch, because and he was 12, 13, and at that age they want to hang with their dad, and I'm like going, hey, I got to go out of town, all that stuff. And he was an average student, he was an average athlete, and he didn't have a lot of self-confidence. But I could see he had much more, much greater potential, and he was really young for his grade. So I just came up with this crazy scheme. I figured, hey, well, if we're challenging the status quo in business, why not just do it, with the family? And so I said, you know what I do? I pull him out of school for a year and take him around the world and give him a chance to catch up, and then he can enter into high school with all the guys that he's playing baseball with that are his age. And then I figured the only way to have him do that is I got to get one of his buddies. And there was another guy who was played baseball on his team, Little League, who was also young for his grade. And thankfully, his parents were open to it, so I approached him and I said, hey, what do you think about pulling these guys out, for a year? And so they went along with it. So then I go to the principal. I said, hey, we're going to pull them out for you. They go, you can't do that. This is a truancy thing. I go, well, who can I talk to? They said, well, the superintendent. The next thing you know, I'm talking to the state, and they said, well, if there's some kind of, school, home school or something. I go, oh, yeah, no, I have a school for them. It's Venture Academy. They go, oh, really? Tell me about it. I go, I just made it up right now. And so what it was all about was growing these two young guys spiritually, physically, and intellectually. And I got their favorite teacher to be their academic sponsor, who would give them homework assignments. And we kicked it off with the first trip was in Africa for a month. And we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. It was the hardest thing ever done. And then we went on a safari. Then, they would come back for a week, and their academic sponsor would say, well, you've got to do a PowerPoint presentation to my 8th grade class, all of them, because I have to teach 5 classes a day, so should you. And by the way, you don't know anything unless you can teach it. And then we'd go off and we do survival training in the Amazon, rainforest, build houses for Habitat for Humanity. I took them over. I was doing a bunch of business over in Japan. You could see that. We took them to Europe. We went scuba diving in the Great Barrier Reef. And it was amazing experience. They would write a journal every day. They had to learn 50 words in every single language wherever they were at. And I could see these two young men transform before my very eyes. And I'll never forget, and I decided to kick it off with a big bang. Let's climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And later on, we climbed peaks in Ecuador, which was a lot. I mean, that was really, really tough. And as we were climbing up Kilimanjaro, there was the biggest fire forest fire in Kilimanjaro history, and we were right at the point. And 7 porters died, not ours, but on this trip, and we had to run through the fire break. We could have died. But anyway, we made it to the top. We're coming down, and you just see scorched earth everywhere. And one of Steve's assignments was to write what it was like to climb or not to climb Kilimanjaro, because you don't choose the mountain chooses you. And I said, well, Steve, what are you going to write about? He goes, I'm not exactly sure, but maybe something like this. After this, I'm never going to complain about any sports practice or any homework again, as long as I live. And so I could see him transform. Now, his one buddy ended up to be a professional pitcher for the Cleveland Indians, and now he's in the enterprise software business. And my son's a spacecraft design engineer at NASA doing the robot arm for Mars 2020. And what was interesting is, as those guys got transformed, I got transformed too. There was a lot of adventure stuff where I was pure terrified and petrified, but that built a bond that will always be there. So, I explained to people, I go, that is insane. It was one of the coolest things I've done in my life.
And do you imagine your son's life may have gone in a different direction had he not taken that year?
Yeah, and when those guys came back, they had confidence for sure, but they had the deepest humility. And what was always interesting for me is, he'd be with some of his other buddies. They're going, "Oh, we're going to this faraway place," and he just said, "Oh boy, that's interesting." It was, it was a place he had been before, and but he never really, bragged about it. But it was life changing. And he's just a great, humble spacecraft design engineer, rocket scientist. So.
No big deal.
He's a huge believer in mentoring. He's mentored me, he mentors other people, and he's a student of mentoring. And he is adding so much value to the whole concept of mentoring all over the country. And if anyone has been lucky enough to be mentored by Keith Krach, they know what I'm talking about. He's simply a force of nature.
I'd like to turn our focus to the Virtual Mentor Network, one of your current ventures. So why will the Virtual Mentor Network be a new category in mentoring?
Yeah, so if you think about the mission, it is to develop that next generation of transformational leaders that the world so desperately and dearly needs. And this stuff isn't really written in a book. And I've been very fortunate in my life to have some great mentors that I learned from, and you particularly learn from their fears and their failures and their flaws, because that kind of, to see these, great mentors being human and also being afraid, and a few how-tos along the way. It's a great way to learn. So, but there's challenges in terms of mentoring. One is there's not enough mentors to go around, particularly transformational ones. And the other thing is that you need multiple mentors, because not every one person can role model every single characteristics. I always talk about it in terms of with my children. I call it the hybrid mentor matrix. Have multiple mentors. Take the best from column A, the best from column B, the best from column C. And I always said, one of my most important jobs in terms of being a father is not only to give you self-esteem, but it's also to find you multiple role models. And so the objective is to bring some of the best transformational leaders that I know that are across sectors. So like 4-star General Stanley McChrystal, Dan Golden, the longest serving director at NASA, Michael Brown, who is probably one of the most epic social entrepreneurs, the guy who founded AmeriCorps. And then also Kim Hammonds, she was CIO of Boeing. She was the chief operating officer of Deutsche Bank. And, have all these, I call them transformational leaders of tomorrow, be able to learn from them and to be able to scale it that way. And it's really creating a two-sided network, and actually used a lot of things that I learned at Ariba when we built the Ariba network with buyers and suppliers and the business-to-business e-commerce area, and also DocuSign, we bring businesses and consumers together. It's really bringing mentors and mentees together at scale to develop that next generation. I think that, to me, is the ultimate pay-it-forward category, and I haven't seen anything out there like that. And I think we're able to put together something that's going to have a big impact on this world.
And with the creation of the Virtual Mentor Network, you've made it clear that your mission and passion is, as you said, to help build the next generation of transformational leaders. Why do you believe that transformational leadership is so important right now, today?
Yeah, Viva, I think there's a number of reasons. First of all, I think the rate of change in this world is accelerating, a lot brought on by technology. So we need honorable leaders who can make this new world a better world for all. Also, problems today are more complex, I think more interconnected. So you need innovative leaders to envision solutions to tackle the tough problems. I also think that our ideals, democracy, is under threat, and we need principled leaders who can defend those ideals. And I think another thing too is that society, the world, is more fragmented and more fractured than ever before. And I think we need that next generation of leaders who are capable of inspiring and mobilizing and unifying. And I just see a desperate need for that.
You have impacted so many lives, but more than that, what I've been so impressed by is that you just have this ball of energy that never ends. And then even more special is that when somebody meets you, they're impressed. They see you on stage, they see you at a keynote, they see you when they shake hands. But what fascinates me the most and what inspires me to become someone like you in many ways is because how you are publicly is exactly how you are privately. Krach, I love that about you because you're not only a transformational leader in the public eye and on the public stage and on TV, but you're a transformational leader behind closed doors. Or you're a transformational leader to your 5 children, to your wife, to your best friends, and certainly to me personally.
As a result of your numerous transformational accomplishments and achievements, E&Y twice named you National Entrepreneur of the Year, and the Harvard Business School Association of Northern California just named you Business Leader of the Year. Congratulations. An honor you now share with giants like George Shultz, Andy Grove, and John Chambers. With all that to reflect on, what would you say has been your greatest accomplishment?
Well, I think a big part in business is the impact on people's lives. And what I mean by that is, I'm an engineer. I've always been focused on productivity. So whether it's in the robotics area, engineering, automation, and that is, those things drive GNP per capita. So increase people's standard of living. I also think reducing friction in terms of global trade. If you look at Ariba, B2B e-commerce, it certainly has driven that. Same with DocuSign. And I've always been at war with paper. You look at DocuSign and say 4,700 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other of paper. And that saves a lot of fuel, a lot of forests. And I think leaving a planet to our grandchildren, they would be proud of. But all that stuff aside, I think it's really about the people's lives that I've come in contact with, and people tell me this a bunch of times that doing things that they never thought they could possibly do. I think impacting people's lives is big, and I think that the most important part of that is family too. And at the end of the day, my legacy, I just want to say, hey, he was a good father. And my dad would always say this. He would always go, you never know how good a father you are until you see your children's children. And I think that applies too. In terms of my business legacy, it's all about people you've helped along the way, and I'll never know how good of business leader I am until I see my mentees, because at the end of the day, I think that's what it's all about.
Well, you've made me teary twice. Thank you for that. I so appreciate you taking the time to talk about transformational leadership and your life and career and family life. You've certainly inspired me, and I hope this interview is an inspiration to many others. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Viva. It's been a true honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't think of a human being on planet Earth more deserving than Keith Krach.
I want to congratulate you on this honor because it is something that you really, really deserve.
I'm just thrilled that I have access to and knowledge of a leader like Keith Krach, who is inspirational as well as transformational, and I just think he's just begun. His best stuff is on its way.
I want to congratulate Keith, first of all, for that amazing award, being the sort of inaugural recipient of the Transformational Leader Award. And I can't think of anybody that would be more deserving.
Thank you for being such an inspirational and transformational leader.
We founded life&news based on our own commitment to transformation. Our vision is to bring a fresh new voice and approach to the digital information business, curating content that is committed to pure authenticity and honesty rather than sensationalism and clickbait journalism. We believe that informative, newsworthy material presented properly brings overall knowledge to the people and ergo a well-being to society. One thing we've learned from Keith is that in order to accomplish our mission, we ourselves need to grow as transformational leaders, and he has inspired us to do so. Keith is the kind of quintessential leader you encounter once in a lifetime, with an unmatched ability to transform his world, the people around him, and himself. By recognizing him as our inaugural Transformational Leader of the Year, we initiate a new annual tradition of finding and honoring the individuals who follow his example and are dramatically transforming our world for the better. It is our hope that in doing so, we join Keith in his mission to help build the next generation of transformational leaders. Salman Khan, another world transformer and creator of the Khan Academy, has said, throughout his career, Keith has brought powerful transformational leadership to many sectors: factory automation, engineering, commerce, education, philanthropy, and even the way people sign documents. His focus on innovation and productivity, combined with his approach of perpetually challenging the status quo and empowering people to accomplish more than they had ever imagined possible, has resulted in a profound impact on GDP per capita, international trade, and the sustainability of our planet. Well, we couldn't agree more. So with that, Keith and Viva, if you wouldn't mind joining me, please. Congratulations. So on behalf of all of us at Life&News, congratulations, Keith, on being named the Transformational Leader of the Year. And here is your lovely award.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.